Were you bad? No. He can't be bad. Look at that face. Today, we're going to talk about Samson. Not a farm dog, Samson. In Duck Reach. So before making this video, I had this awesome idea a few weeks ago to make a video about Samson. So I got home from grocery shopping this morning and the house was quiet and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the video. Well, Samson, he decided he wanted to go for a run around the community and busted through my front door and took off. Now, for those of you who follow me on Instagram, normally that's where I talk about Samson the most. He is my baby. And, you know, he's just my baby. He is not a farm dog. In fact, I use hashtag not a farm dog Samson very often. But all of the morning struggles aside, I do want to talk to you about Samson. I have touched on this in writing a little bit on our Facebook page, but I wanted to kind of talk to you about it today because I feel like it's important. It's an important thing that people don't really think about unless they actually have to deal with it. So, Samson is a Labrador Retriever. He's 2 years old. At about 1 year old, Samson had a grand mal seizure. If you've never witnessed an animal having a seizure, it is just as terrible as watching a human have one. Though maybe a little less terrifying, but it's still, you know, it's hard to watch an animal go through something and you can't help them. So, he had a seizure. We took him to the vet. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. We did blood tests. We did blood work. Nothing wrong with him at all. So they labeled him as having epilepsy. Because that's just what they do. When they don't know why something is happening, they give it a label. So, he was fine. I did some research and I took him off of the dog food that he was on. I put him on a grain-free dog food, a wild and free dog food, which is really natural. And I also introduced raw food into his diet. So now you can't give raw food and dry food at the same time. So you have to make sure there's at least, 8 hours or so in between that time. So we give him raw bison bones. That not only helps him with digestion, but it also helps clean his teeth. So we saw a significant difference in Samson just in general. He did not have another seizure for about 6 to 8 months. So the second seizure that Samson had came about 6 hours after giving him Frontline. That was not coincidental. Now your vet will tell you, well, if you have a dog with epilepsy, certain things can bring on seizures in them. But my vet was confused because she's never seen seizures happen when you give them Frontline. But we have ruled out that Frontline was probably the cause for the second seizure that he had. Clearly, he has an oversensitized nervous system, and because Frontline is a topical chemical that you put on your dog's skin right at the spinal cord, that probably was the cause of his second seizure. Now, we had gotten a little bit comfortable after the second seizure. He was doing really well until he had his third seizure just a few weeks ago. It was very off the whim. We actually got to see it from start to finish this time, or I did. And I was confused because it wasn't like the other seizures that he had. It was a grand mal seizure. All three of them have been grand mal seizures. But it wasn't what I was expecting it to be in the beginning. But I think it was a good learning experience for me. Basically what happened was he started vomiting and then he was fine. But then about 30 seconds or so later, he just started running. And so he literally ran from the basement all the way up the stairs into the living room. And then once he got to the living room, he finally started seizing. So he had that amount of time to kind of run and be coherent. from the time of vomiting to the time of actually having the seizure. What I did notice though this time is that at some point we had been picking up the wrong dog food, because the bags look really similar. And the one dog food that we had been picking up was not grain-free. I had also noticed in the weeks before that he was really gassy, really kind of vomiting a lot here and there. He was just kind of, ugh. And there's a scent gland on their rear that'll burst open sometimes. If you have dogs, you know exactly what I'm talking about right now, and you probably made that "oh" face. But it was popping every few days, and I thought, that is really weird. So when he had this last seizure, it caused me to kind of reevaluate the feed and stuff that we've been giving him, because there was no rhyme or reason to why he had it. He had not had Frontline. We haven't used Frontline for almost a year now. Or no, not a year, about 8 months now. There were no other factors unless he sniffed something outside. So I realized then that we had not been getting the grain-free food. I switched back over to the grain-free food the next day. I went out and bought some new food. He has not had gas issues. He has not had intestinal issues. The scent gland has not been bursting every few days. He's back to himself. He's back to normal. In fact, he had started to kind of look a little, not skinny, because he's not a skinny dog by any means, but his body form looked different from eating the grain feed. So he got the grain-free food, the wild and free food again, and he's doing much better. I say all of this for two reasons. The first reason is I want you to understand what happens when an animal has a seizure. Because we've had to learn the hard way. I almost got my face ripped off by him during his second seizure, okay? This is serious stuff, and I didn't realize it, and you don't know unless you've been through it. I didn't know. When a dog or any animal, and I say this because I feel like it's relevant to you homesteaders who have large animals too. Horses and cows and large animals can have seizures too for a multitude of reasons. But when any animal has a seizure, after they go into the seizure state, if you can get them, if they are in your presence when it's happening, if you can get them to a level area for them to seize on, that's great. But most of the time you might not be around. So the most important thing is what happens after they come out of the seizure. As humans, we are creatures of comfort. We want to go and we want to comfort them and say, oh, it's okay, you're all right. But the sad reality is that they have no idea what just happened to them. They have no idea where they are, and they have no idea who you are. That is the scary part. And even if they do know who you are, their eyesight is really bad coming out of a seizure, and therefore they're very cautious. Now, this last seizure that Samson had, it took him about 15 minutes to allow him to come near me without me being scared for myself. He would growl at me. He would bark at me as if he didn't know who I was. He was very confused. He did not know what was happening, what was going on, where he was, or who I was. Partially because they can be blind, but also because he just didn't know who I was. And I hate saying that, but it's true. He simply didn't know who I was. So the easiest thing to do when you witness this, when an animal has come out of a seizure, is to back away. Back them into an area. We have baby gates, even though we don't have babies anymore. And he's scared of the baby gates. And so I'll put the baby gates up so that he cannot leave the room that he's in. I will dim the lights down, put the baby gates up while he's seizing. Because listen, as long as he's in a safe area, there's nothing I can do when he's having a seizure. I can't help him in any way. Now, obviously, you want to make sure that the seizure doesn't last a long time. If it does, then you need to get professional help immediately. Otherwise, your animal could die. But if it's a normal seizures last between, 30 seconds and 2 minutes. If it goes over that, then yes, you need to consider calling a veterinarian. But I dim the lights, I turn any loud sounds off, I block him off into the room, and then I go away. Okay, so I went away. My child was downstairs in the basement watching TV. He knew not to come upstairs. And that's another thing, if you have kids around animals, they need to know about it if an animal has seizures. And then I went into my bedroom and I read a book for a little while. Now, I'd peep my head around the corner every now and then, and he would growl at me or he would bark at me. But the moral of that story, overall universal animal, back away, get into a safe area or an area where you're not obtrusive to them, and let them come out of it themselves. Don't run up to them and say, oh, you poor thing, are you okay? Especially a horse. I can't imagine watching a horse go through that and then trying to go up there and comfort them. You would probably get killed. So be aware of what's happening. And then there's a process that they go through after that. It takes about an hour for them to, it can even take a couple of hours for them to kind of calm down. After an animal comes out of a seizure, their adrenaline is going really bad. I mean, just going. They will pace back and forth. They will walk around. The worst thing you could do to them is confine them in that moment. If your dog has had a seizure and you want to put the dog in the crate, no, you don't do that. Let the dog run around the house. You know, after the coast is clear, if you have an outdoor area and it's not too hot, allow them to go in there and just walk and walk and walk. They're going to pace and pace and pace because they have so much adrenaline to get out of them. During the time after the seizure as well, you're going to have to clean up some stuff if you have an animal in the house that's doing it. Feces will be expressed, and that's what happens. If it's outside, obviously, that there's not an issue there, you can just leave it. So that's the first part of this, how to properly deal with an animal that's had a seizure. And the best thing you can do is leave them alone as long as they're in a safe area. Walk away at a safe distance. Pay attention. You know, make sure your animal is doing okay. You don't want to just leave your animal out there by itself. But keep your distance until you know that animal. I would give at least 15 minutes before you try to go out there, especially if it's in the barnyard, and try to work with that animal, because if they don't know who you are still, it would be bad news for you. The second half of this is nutrition. I feel like, especially with pet nutrition, we live in a society that is filler based, okay? So in order to keep costs down, a lot of food companies, even farm food companies for your animals, they want to fill your food with fillers. If you looked on the back of the bag of the old feed that we had, it was rice and soybean oil, and it was just stuff that was just filler. It wasn't stuff that a normal dog would eat. You look on the back of the new feed we have, and it's chicken and it's bison. Actually, we do give him the bison one. He's a big fan of bison. We are too. We love bison. And it's real food, and there's no grain in it. You know, we have this whole gluten-free movement in humans, but we don't think about it with our animals, okay? Gluten's not necessarily a bad thing, but if an animal or a person is eating too much of it, then it can affect their bodies. So I think that could have caused the third seizure. Being conscious of your animal's diet. That's why we really believe in non-GMO and organic when you can get it for your animals. That includes your chickens and your rabbits and your ducks, and that includes our dogs too, whether they're farm dogs or not farm dogs. And then the other part of this is to be careful holistically in your home, okay, and on your homestead. I'm going to be honest with you, I had to stop. I had been treating a chicken with, and this is another real possibility, I had been treating a chicken with tea tree oil, okay? Now, chickens can be treated with tea tree oil. However, tea tree oil can be highly toxic to dogs at times. It's not suggested that you use it on your dog, okay? I had a rag with tea tree oil on it in the dirty clothes hamper. Now, it was fairly buried, but could he have gotten in the dirty clothes hamper and pulled it out? Possibly. Possibly he could have, because honestly, I don't keep track of who. Come on. We live in a house with boys. I don't keep track of who's throwing stuff on the floor. I just pick it up. So that is a possibility. Could he have that morning, maybe a couple of hours before, gone into the clothes hamper and sniffed the tea tree oil or licked it? Yes, that is a possibility, and that is a lesson that I learned the hard way, that it could have been a possibility. Not saying that's what happened, I'm just saying that is a possibility of what could have happened. So when you're treating holistically on your homestead, guys, we like to read blogs and we like to watch videos of holistic treatment, and I am guilty of this, and this made me think about it too. I give you these examples how to treat holistically, but then it's kind of a general broad range. I don't really tell you what animals to use it on and what animals not to use it on. Because if we're being honest, I don't know. So when I use a video and I'm telling you how I'm treating a chicken, then that's how I'm treating a chicken. That's not necessarily how I would treat a goat or a dog or your 3-year-old. So that is something to really keep in mind and think about. But also holistic medicine safety on your homestead. I left that rag laying around. Now, I don't have any young children in my home. My son is almost 7. He knows better. But what if I had, a younger child, which I wouldn't have done, but, and they got a hold of it and put it in their mouth or something, Holistic medicine is awesome, but it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Each animal has a different tolerance level, and each animal has different things that they can be treated with and not be treated with. So I encourage you to check that out. Be careful with what you have laying around holistically, because yes, it does work. Yes, essential oils are as potent as antibiotics. And so it's just like treating them as if there were a child in your house that could get into them, a medicine cabinet. So just a caution with you there to keep everything up and safe. I learned my lesson that day. Not saying that's what happened, but just saying I always look over the broad range of possibilities of what could be happening. And that was a possibility that could have happened. So there we have it. Met Samson, our dog, our pet. He is not a farm dog. He's not a guardian dog. He's semi-useless, if we're being honest, but he is like a child to us, and he's not useless. He's good for loving and hugs and cuddles, and he's taught us a lot on this journey. Okay, he's taught us about treating our pets as equally as we treat our farm animals. We're always about wanting to feed our farm animals organically, but then inside the house, it's kind of like, well, why not feed your dog organically? So those are some things I wanted to just run by you guys, some lessons I've learned in the past few weeks, and some good safety information, not just for seizures, but with holistic medicine and being aware of what's in your holistic medicine cabinet and whether it's easy to get to or not. So hope you guys have a great weekend. I will talk to you soon. Happy homesteading.